Hello and welcome everybody. Welcome back to Comedian MTG. My name is Ian. On this episode, we are going to be breaking down March of the Machine, MTG's newest set, and we're going to be talking about the cards that I think, the top 10 that have cEDH implications, and we're going to talk about why I think those cards are cEDH viable, and talk about a couple honorable mentions as well. Apart from that, we're going to jump right into this video, but while we're here, just reminding you to hit like and subscribe if you enjoy content like this, and if you're feeling super generous, go check out patreon.com/comedianmtg. I haven't talked about this a ton on the channel yet, but coming this June, I am taking some time to go full into content, so I know a lot of the stuff that needs to get reworked on the channel, things like the Patreon, stuff like that, are all going to be really addressed this summer, so I'm really excited to get the time to be able to take on those new projects, work on the stuff that I'm really excited about, and there's a lot of really cool stuff coming up for the channel, especially when it comes to like late June, early July. So keep your eye out for that, guys, and make sure to check out patreon.com/comedianmtg. And for anyone who supports the channel already, thank you so much. Without any further ado, let's jump into this set review. The first honorable mention is not actually from the main set itself, but it is from the March of the Machine Commander product. And it's the only card from the Commander product that I really wanted to highlight, because I think this Commander is actually really, really cool and really solid. It is Shalai and Halar. Now, for those who don't know, there's a lot of these like mashup commanders, which is very like, superhero endgame kind of style stuff, but it's very cool. It's these mashup commanders taking legendaries from Magic's past and sort of putting them together into one card. And this one's really cool. It is a Flying Vigilance 3/3 for 1 in Naya. This is whenever one or more +1/+1 counters are put on a creature you control, Shalai and Halar deals that much damage to target opponent. Now, the card is really relevant for cEDH because it actually just combos with a bunch of different cards. So anytime your commander that gives you a wide variety of colors has a ton of one-card combos, it's something really worth taking a look at. And a lot of these one card combos are with creatures, which, as anyone who's seen me like talk in this channel knows, in cEDH, creature combos are extremely difficult to interact with. Creature combos that also have one of the pieces in the command zone are extremely tough to interact with. Think about things like the Malcolm Glinthorn combo and how, many results that combo is put up in cEDH in general. Or think about things like the Minsk Hulk deck and the fact that that turns a one card creature combo into a win with many more pieces than this one. So the fact that this card combos with things like the new Heliod, it combos with things like the Red Terror from the Warhammer decks. There's a bunch of different one-card combos with it. That's the other cool part, is like it's not just one-card combo. It has multiple one-card creature combos that just go infinite with this card. A lot of them do require that you have combat damage with Shalai and Halar after you play one of these creatures, but I don't think that's a huge requirement, and I think there's a lot of different ways that this deck can really, really pop off, and maybe even pop off at instant speed, pop off with a lot of efficiency. I'm really excited to build this deck. There's actually a bunch of talk in my Discord right now about the best ways to build the deck. I tend to lean, if I'm playing these colors, into a little bit more of a Staxy style deck with, once again, a Stax deck with a one card win condition with your commander is a really, really huge advantage. So Shalai and Halar definitely has me very excited about these one-card combos, and one-card combos that most of them get through Collector Roof and stuff like that. So like just a lot of really solid reasons to really like this combo, and I'm really excited to brew around these commanders. It's definitely one of the commanders from this set that I think is just insanely free to brew around and will probably have the biggest impact in the format. I can really see this deck being a real contender in the format, which is another just crazy addition to the Naya color pie. And that color combination kind of went from non-existent in cEDH to being a real thing real quick. The other honorable mention before we get into our top 4 is Chrome Host Seed Shark. Now, this is a 2/4 flyer for 2 and blue. So whenever you cast a non-creature spell, incubate X, where X is that spell's mana value. And an incubator token is basically like this token that is just an artifact, and then you can pay 2, and equal to the counters on it, it becomes a creature with that power and toughness. The cool part about Chrome Host Seed Shark, and the reason why it's only an honorable mention, is I think this card is really, really good in Urza, mono blue Urza, because now suddenly all of your non-creature spells are turning into Mox Sapphires. And there have been things in the past that like only trigger off instant sorceries that are giving you artifacts in that deck, but this literally triggers off any non-creature spell. So you could do something like play your Urza and then play like a Mana Crypt, and this also will give you another artifact for 0 that is able to be tapped for mana. And because you pay X into them to turn them into creatures, it's not like it dies right away, because just as the incubator token, it is not a Phyrexian yet, and therefore it is not a creature. So I think it's just a really interesting creature that turns all of your non-creatures in Urza into more and more mana rocks. And you know, the reality chip version of Urza is already one that I was pushing for a really long time, which is the creature friendly version of Urza. And I think if you're playing Urza and you're playing the reality chip variant, or if you're playing a variant that is not playing the poly tyrant combos, I think Chrome Host Seed Shark is just like probably an auto include, in my opinion. I think it gives you such free value in that deck. All of your counter spells are turning into mana rocks. All of your artifacts are turning into mana rocks. Anything you play in that deck that is not a creature is turning into a mana rock. On top of the fact that in the late game, Urza has trouble sometimes like turning the corner and closing the game. Suddenly, if you're flooding out, you can start actually paying to like unincubate these tokens, and then suddenly you have an army of 2/2s and 3/3s and etc. And you're actually using your incubator tokens as a win con, as a board state, if you start basically flooding out and not getting enough draw for your mana. So I think this card is actually really, really solid in that one deck, and I don't really see a lot of other places for it, so which is why it's only an honorable mention for this one. There's definitely a lot of really cool legendaries in this set, and Etali Primal Conqueror is one of them. This is a new take on Etali, and it's just worth mentioning here because this is an infinite mana outlet in the command zone in the Gruul color pie. Gruul has traditionally sort of suffered when it comes to really solid outlets in the command zone, and this is one of those things where it's like, you don't always get to a point where you're going to play a card like this, but if the game starts to stall out, like a 7/7 Trampler with a really, really solid enter the battlefield effect is not a bad place to be. So it combos off with Dockside combos, like with Temur Sabertooth. You can bounce this infinitely after you have bounced your Sabertooth. It also can go infinite with Food Chain, because you can replay this from the command zone over and over again. So there's a number of different ways to turn this into a Gruul infinite mana outlet in the command zone, and it's pretty cool. And I think this is the first ever Gruul hybrid Food Chain and infinite mana outlet with Dockside Commander, which I don't think has been done before, as I said, which is kind of cool. And then, in the crazy late games, for some reason, if this is something that is going to like an absolute board stall and you have nothing but mana, but you can't win the game, you can always just transform Etali and just have it turn into a Blightsteel Colossus, basically, which is silly and probably not ever going to be relevant, but it's kind of cute. And that's Etali, and Gruul doesn't get a lot of love, so I think it's kind of cute that there's this new Gruul deck, and maybe it's something that people start playing. Our number 9 card is Folly and the Get Drug Monster. We did a live brew of this deck here on the channel. My genuine opinion of this deck is that it's basically, there's not many advantages of this deck over Tymna and Halana, unfortunately. Tymna Halana is just like probably the best thing you've been doing in Abzan, but Folly and the Get Drug Monster definitely has potential. The fact that the creatures non-basics your opponent's control has this like sort of stacks effect on the command zone. There's also some cute stuff you can do with the fact that your commander has Death Touch and First Strike. There's definitely little synergies that you can do that we didn't really get to cover in the live brew that might make it worth exploring a little bit more, but those are definitely ones that might take a little bit more exploration. But it is a sack outlet in the command zone for your Protean Hulk piles, which Tymna Halana does technically give you, but it's a lot clunkier than this deck, right? With this deck, all you have to do is get your Hulk on the battlefield, go to combat, sack your Hulk. That's pretty easy. It's not that hard to get to that point. This one also allows you to start ramping by playing more lands on each of your turns. So there's definitely intricacies to the Folly and the Get Drug Monster that make it different enough than Tymna Halana that make it worth like exploring as a deck, as an archetype, as like sack outlet in the command zone. Once again, is definitely a big part of that. But in general, I don't know that I would play this over Tymna Halana in a strictly gonna go to a cEDH tournament with the best version of this archetype type of thing. But super fun to explore. I loved checking out new decks. Once again, these cool monster mashup cards are really, really cool, and it's cool to talk about them. Simone and Dina, another one of these mashup cards. It says, it's for Sultai, whenever you draw your second card each turn, target opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. Then it has a tap ability, sack another creature, draw a card. You can put a land from your hand on the battlefield tapped, and if you control 8 or more lands, repeat this process once. The cool part about this card is that it can work with Protean Hulk style archetypes because it is a Sacker Outlet on the command zone. So you get that initial Protean Hulk sacrifice from this card. Also, definitely gives you a lot of like incidental value as you have it on the command zone. And it just like, it's card advantage. It's a little bit of land ramp. It has this sort of pinging ability that eventually can start to add up if you have something like a Ristic Study, just like pinging off every turn when your opponents are casting spells. So there's a lot of like little cute stuff this card can do. I don't know how much it's going to really make an impact in the command zone. The pure Sultai cost is a little clunky when it comes to cEDH costs, which means like you're probably only playing it if you're doing like Mana Dork into this, which is fine. If you're in a Protean Hulk strategy, you probably want a bunch of creatures anyways, but it's really cool to see this like Protean Hulk sack outlet in the command zone. I think the argument then becomes like, why play this over something like a Thrasios Tevesh combo, which is a really hard argument in my opinion, because Thrasios Tevesh is just a really solid combination of commanders. Simone and Dina is a lot cheaper to get onto the battlefield than Tevesh as far as the sack outlet is concerned, and it's a creature as opposed to a non-creature, so I think that's definitely an argument in its favor. And once again, the incidental value that the activated ability can give you is actually probably worth taking a look at. So I think this is an interesting card. I'm interested to see if anyone actually does put in the work to be able to make it a cEDH deck for sure. Number 7, we are looking at Phyrexian Censor. So it is a Phyrexian wizard, 3/3 for 2 and a white. Each player can't cast more than one non-Phyrexian spell each turn. So it's a non-Phyrexian rule of law, and non-Phyrexian creatures enter the battlefield tapped. Now, when I saw this card, I was ecstatic. I was like, oh my god, we got another rule of law effect for Winota. And then I kept reading the card and I went, oh, shoot. It messes up a bunch of stuff in Winota, which is really, really tough. And I was really, really sad about that part. But there are decks that are rule of law decks that are not Winota that I think might actually play this card. Specifically for those who are curious of why to not play this card in Winota, specifically, it shuts off your Kiki-Jiki combos, which kind of suck. Like, those are the few things you can do in games where you get your Winota locked out, is be able to combo off the Kiki-Jiki. You can't combo off with the Combat Celebrant. It basically makes all of your combos that are your infinite combat combos have your creatures come in tapped, and therefore make those combos completely irrelevant, which stinks because 3/3 rule of law effect, being able to attack in every turn and get you Winota triggers, sounds really, really cool, but it does the things of shutting off your combos, it shuts off your haste creatures. It's actually a lot worse than it looks like, which is really tough, because on paper, the initial look on this card was like, oh, this is a really exciting opportunity, but the second benefit of the card actually ends up being a bit of a downside, which kind of sucks. I think there are other, once again, rule of law decks that are probably going to want to play this card, and for those decks, that's really awesome, and you get another rule of law effect, and rule of law effects are very important in a format in which a lot of decks really struggle to beat those effects. It is really tough for certain archetypes to be able to stop this type of effect, and the fact that another one of these exists and it has a really efficient body, which in stacks matchups actually does matter, is pretty cool. Number 6, we have Urabrask. This is a 4/4 first strike for 2 and 2 red. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, it deals 1 damage to target opponent, and you can add a red mana to your mana pool. Then you can pay a red and exile it, then return it to the battlefield transformed under its owner's control. Activate only as a sorcery, and only if you've cast 3 or more instant and sorceries this turn. It will transform to the Saga, known as the Great Work. The Great Work deals 3 damage to target opponent and each creature they control. For Chapter 1, create 3 treasures is Chapter 2, and Chapter 3 is in turn the end of the turn. You can cast instant sorceries from any graveyard. If a spell cast this way would be put into a graveyard, exile instead, and then you flip it back over to its other side. Really cool card. The obvious comparison is this is sort of like a Burgi that also is the win condition for Burgi in the command zone, because not only are you getting the mana for these instant and sorcery spells, you're also pinging your opponents when you're doing it. Now, obviously worth mentioning, Burgi triggers off any spell, and this is only instant sorceries for Urabrask. But the fact that it is, once again, giving you mana has a really efficient body, and then is also doing damage to your opponents, also being the outlet for something like this. Also a card you can double up with cards like Bergie, so Storm decks are looking to really like this card. It's a really interesting Storm payoff. I don't know that every deck is going to want to flip it over to its Saga side, but there are definitely some times where, you know, you're playing against a Stacks matchup or something like that, and you really need to just wipe the board, and it's obviously a little tough because you have to still cast 3 instant sorceries to flip it. But, you know, sometimes there's going to be a really important creature on your opponent's board, and you just go spell, flip, wipe their whole board for 3 damage to all their creatures. I think this is a card that's going to have relevant upside in the format. I'm very curious to see where it actually ends up. It's also a card that I could see never seeing play, because 4 mana is a lot to invest in this card. But I think this card has potential. I think it's really interesting. As I mentioned, the fact that it doesn't trigger on every spell like Bergie definitely makes it a little worse in that aspect, but the, you know, basically being an outlet in the command zone is something worth mentioning. So very cool to see this card. Really unique design. You know, it's one of the few flip Praetors that's actually has potential, so I'm really interested to see if people actually end up playing this deck, because Urabrask is really cool, and if you ever flip it over and get to the 3rd chapter of the saga, I mean, it's a Mnemonic Betrayal plus an Underworld Breach in 1 spell, or I guess close to a Yawgmoth's Will, right? That's pretty good. I guess it's only instant sorcery, so it's a Past in Flames from every graveyard, but still, that is very solid, and if you ever get to that point, seems really good. Number 5, another mashup card. A mashup of 2 of my favorite creatures of all time, Croxa and Kunoros. So Theros Beyond Death gave us Croxa, however you want to say it, which was like one of my first commanders that I ever got really known for in cEDH, and I'm so excited that this commander gets a whole new light by adding Kunoros to it. So it's a Vigilance Menace lifelink for 3 in Mardu. When it enters the battlefield or it attacks, you can exile 5 cards from your graveyard. When you do, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. So the reason this card is relevant is because with the card Altar of Dementia, you can cast Croxa and Kunoros, sacrifice it with the enter to the battlefield, trigger on the stack, and when that happens, basically, you can create a loop where you are milling 6 cards, exiling 5 to reanimate itself, and you basically go through that loop over and over again. And when you do that loop, you start to mill your whole deck, and then basically you get to your graveyard to the point where you're like, okay, I have a 2-card combo in my graveyard. I'm going to then use my last reanimation to reanimate the last piece to get that combo going. You can do things like get a Karmic Guide back, to get your Kiki, to get your Felidar Guardian, etc., like that classic pile. You can also do, some people were looking at things with Angel of Glory's Rise, which is like an old cEDH card. So there's definitely ways to just like turn this card plus Altar of Dementia into I win the game button, which is pretty solid for, once again, 1-card combo with your commander in the command zone. A 2-mana artifact is super cheap and easy to get out. So this card definitely has potential. And also, you know, there's something to be said about playing like a Staxy fair reanimator strategy, right? So if you don't have your Altar of Dementia, but you have a Razaketh in the graveyard, I think I'm pretty happy with like playing my commander, having a 6/6 Vigilance Menace lifelinker and a Razaketh on the battlefield to have your Razaketh sack this to go get some stuff. So as far as like just the plain value plan, you can get some cards in your graveyard. This just turns into reanimate in the command zone, which is, I mean, that could be a lot worse for sure. So Croxa and Kunoros definitely has potential. Once again, having that 1-card win condition in the command zone, definitely really solid. And, you know, I think this card has a lot of potential. Our last mashup. This is number 4 on our top 10, and this is our last mashup. And it's not even one that we're really looking to play in the command zone. This is Drana and Linvala. Now, there's definitely people who are going to try and play this in the command zone. I think this card is just a great piece in the 99. It is a Flying Vigilance 3/4 for 1, white, black. And it says activated abilities of creatures your opponents control can't be activated. That sounds like a lot like Linvala. And it says Drana and Linvala has all activated abilities of creatures your opponents control. You can spend mana as though it were mana of any color to activate those abilities. So not only do you get a one-sided Linvala, a one-sided Curse Totem, right? You get your Linvala effect. You also then get to steal the abilities of your opponent's creatures. This card's insanely good. Like, there's so many scenarios where you get to be like, oh, okay, I'm going to play this card, and it's my Thrasios of yours, and also it then will tap for mana to activate itself being your Thrasios. Just crazy scenarios like that where this card is just such a haymaker. And it turns scenarios where you go from stopping your opponents winning the game to now I'm taking your infinite mana outlet. Maybe I'm taking your combo piece. Maybe I'm taking your activated ability that's going to just win you the game. In scenarios like your opponent's having a meal on the battlefield, you play your own dockside, you can suddenly dockside combo with your Drana and Linvala, right? Now, I'm not saying that scenario is going to come up all the time, but the fact that it's, once again, just another Linvala, which is a card that has historically seen a decent amount of stacks play in cEDH. Like, a lot of stacks decks are playing that card. And then here comes a better version that's a better attacker, does better combat, and also has more upside, and also can be just played in the same deck as Linvala. Like, it's redundancy in the worst case to be able to shut those abilities off, and in the best case scenario, it can turn your Hate Bearer into like an infinite mana outlet or like a super busted activated ability. I think this card is super, super powerful. 4 mana is obviously a lot of mana, but in the decks that are going to want this card, it's going to be insane. I have zero hesitation saying that this card is going to just steal games from under people because you're going to turn their combos into your combos. Here's the card that I am the most excited for from this set. The other two cards feel like much safer cards in this set. And by safer, I mean they just feel like instant staples. Whereas this card, I think, is going to revolutionize an archetype. To be honest, for those who don't know, there was some Twitter discussion about this card. Sinestra had mentioned that the Tassiger Discord had found a line with this card in it, and it basically involves the card Saw in half. So if you get a Hoarding Broodlord onto the battlefield, which the insinuation is that you can cheat this card onto the battlefield, right? So say you reanimate it for 1 mana, right? You take your 8 damage, you get it on the battlefield for 1 mana. The card you go search up with it. Well, here, let me read the card first. So 5 black, convoke, flying, 7/6, and when it enters the battlefield, search your library for a card, exile it face down, then shuffle. For as long as that card remains exiled, you can play it. Spells you cast from exile have convoke. It's basically a runes card demon with upside. And the upside is that it also reduced the cost of these spells, right? So the big line, and the one that was talked about the most, is that you get Hoarding Broodlord, you go and search up a Saw in half. So this is where the 2 mana comes in, right? Because you tap your Hoarding Broodlord, and that counts as the black pip for your Saw in half. The Saw in half only then costs 2 colorless. So basically what this card says is for 2 colorless, you're going to win the game. And because you Saw in half your Hoarding Broodlord, right? That makes 2 more Broodlords, which each of them have their search ability that says go get 2 more cards. There are also 2 creatures that you can tap for a mana to convoke things, right? So you have 2 more Broodlords on the battlefield. The 2 cards you get are a card like Sacrifice / Burning Inquiry, both of those cards are fine, and Peer into the Abyss. So what you do is you'll tap one of your Broodlords to cast the sacrifice a copy of your Broodlord. It gets you 8 black mana, and then you can Peer into the Abyss with a black mana floating. And actually with 2 black mana floating, because you can tap your last Broodlord to help pay one of the black pips in this card. So, Hoarding Broodlord, if you have 2 colorless mana, basically means I'm going to cast a Peer into the Abyss with 2 black mana floating. That is just one implication of this card. Now, you have to play some dead cards in the deck, so these are decks that you're going to want to play a card like Sacrifice or Burnt Offering in already, right? But once again, that turns Reanimate effects into Reanimate plus 2 mana, I win the game. Which Reanimate has traditionally struggled a lot to just be able to reanimate one thing and just win. We've had to use cards like Villas, right? Like you reanimate a Villas and it's like, okay, I draw 8 cards, maybe I'll see something there. You cast a Peer in the Abyss, you know you're going to win the game, right? So this card is really, really interesting in that respect. Now, there are other combos that do exist, and that's the really cool part about this card. And one thing that I've enjoyed in my testing of this card is that even if you're not playing specifically like Sacrifice or Burnt Offering into a Peer into the Abyss, a lot of the time you can still assemble other combos with it and use this sort of Saw in half strategy to be able to get cards that allow you to provide a lot of advantage. Now, the Saw in half Sacrifice stuff seems to be the most efficient way to just like cast Peer in the Abyss, I win the game. And I think that's probably the best way to go about it. But there's a lot of potential here for a lot of other stuff. And because of that, I'm really, really excited to see what this card has in store for cEDH. I think that as someone who is a huge fan of Reanimator, between this card and Atraxa, the new one, that Reanimator has gotten a lot of really cool legs recently. I think this card is infinitely better than Atraxa. I think these Saw in Half combos are really going to change the game for Reanimator decks. I think for a long time people have been saying like, okay, we don't have our Grizzlebrand. I think this might be our Grizzlebrand. I'm really excited about this card in Dargo decks. I have a deck that I've been working on, which is a Jund Dargo variant where you either try to reanimate this card or cheat it into something like an Eldritch Evolution or a Birthing Pod. And not to give away all my tech right away, but I guess I just did. It's really spicy, and being able to have this card in your deck while also being able to do just like the crazy ad nause lines and stuff like that, it works. It really works, and it's really, really cool. I like this card a lot. I think, once again, as a fan of Reanimator and someone who's always been like, why doesn't this work in cEDH? I'm so happy that we have a card that just says, like, this is the cleanest way to play Reanimator in this format. And I think it's a really exciting thing for the format. I'm really excited to see what people do with this card. I'm really excited to see if people end up playing it in the ways that I hope they do. And that, as I mentioned, the Ikoria Dargo deck with this card as its main payoff is like something I'm very excited to be testing in the near future. So definitely a really cool card, and I'm really, really happy it's been printed because, it's not every day that people just reinvigorate an archetype with one card. Here we have the Invasion of Ikoria. It is a battle, and for those who don't know, battles are really weird. They're like sorceries, but then also they come into the battlefield, and you can then attack them, and then they turn into stuff. Kind of weird, but the reason this one's relevant is because it is Invasion of Ikoria, and it is for 2 green and X. When it enters the battlefield, search your library and or graveyard for a non-human creature card with mana value X or less. Put it onto the battlefield. For those who are listening to this card, it may sound familiar to one of the best tutors in cEDH, which is Finale of Devastation. Now, unlike Finale of Devastation, it is not an infinite mana payoff in the same way that Finale is just an infinite mana payoff, right? Finale becomes your Crater Hoof Behemoth at the end of the game, as well as being your tutor. Invasion of Ikoria doesn't quite do that, but I'm happy to pay 2 green and 2 generic mana to put a Dockside on the battlefield 99% of the time in cEDH. There are many more examples, I think, that we can provide as far as why Finale of Devastation is good on its first half and why this card, being basically that card, is good on its first half. And then also has the upside of, you give it to an opponent without a lot of stuff, you attack it a couple times, and you get this 8/8 dinosaur thing that is also just kind of a win con, and you can, basically destroy a bunch of creatures on your opponent's board by flipping into that. That's not why you're playing the card. I think you're playing the card because a second Finale of Devastation is probably worth it 99% of the time, but it has other upside too, which is pretty cool. Our number 1 card from March to the Machine is Faerie Mastermind. This is a 1 blue for a flash flyer. Whenever an opponent draws their second card each turn, you draw a card. And you can pay 4 mana to make each player draw a card. This card is an instant staple in cEDH, in my opinion. Tim Necrom's like the best deck in the format, according to a lot of people. And this card is just kind of stupid in that deck. It is a 2/1 flash flyer that gains you incidental advantage. It's another card adding to the fact that rogues are becoming an archetype that are slowly becoming more relevant in cEDH. I mention this every time they print another cool rogue because they keep seeming to do that. And this is just another cool rogue that has a really, really solid upside. But apart from the rogue text, like a 2/1 flyer that has this ability is good enough on its own. The initial, whenever your opponent draws a second card each turn, you draw a card. Because that happens a lot in cEDH. Basically, this turns your opponent's Croms into, oh, hey, you triggered your Crom on your turn. Great, I'm going to draw a card. You triggered your Tymna on your turn. I'm going to draw a card. You had 2 things played into your Rhystic Study. I'm going to draw a card. Like, anytime these things are relevant, this card comes up. The activated ability, each player draws a card, means, unless I'm mistaken, you draw a card, and then for every opponent whose second card it is, you're drawing a card on top of that too. So there's potential for that to just be like your opponents each draw 1, you draw 4. It's an infinite mana outlet, technically speaking. You can deck your opponents by infinitely having this card, or you can just draw your whole deck and hope you can beat your opponents by drawing your whole deck. It's a Tymna attacker that flies in the air, and it also has flash, so you can hold up counter magic and then go, oh cool, no one casts any spells this turn, I'm going to flash this in instead. Or my opponent is triggering their Tymna to draw a card, you flash this in instead, draw a bunch of cards off of it. I think this is one of the most free card advantage engines they've ever printed for cEDH. I legitimately think this is an instant staple in the format. I think you need like 30 copies of this card because it's going to be in every blue deck. And if I'm wrong about that, I would be insanely surprised. I think this card's so good in the format. I think this is the new cEDH staple. I think every blue deck is going to be playing it, like I said. And one of the best parts about playing blue in cEDH is not only your counter spells, but your card advantage engines. And they just printed an insane one. It's just crazy. I think this card is just nothing but upside. It's really, really strong, so flexible. Like the flash part, they didn't need flash, but the fact that it has flash makes it just so great. I have nothing but amazing things to say about this card. I'm really excited to see where it is in the format, and I know for a fact I will be buying many, many copies of this card. It's so good, and definitely the best card, hands down, for March of the Machine. Thank you, everybody, for watching this March of the Machine set review for cEDH, the top 10 cards from this set. If you like videos like this, please make sure to hit like and subscribe because it helps out the channel a ton. As I mentioned, a lot of amazing stuff coming down the pipeline for this channel, especially when it comes to these summer months. So any support now, especially over at patreon.com/comedianmtg, helps out the channel a ton. Also, a reminder that we are affiliated with Dragonshield. They are an awesome creator of sleeves and one of the best, card game sleeve creators in the game. And I'm super happy to be supported by Dragonshield. There's an affiliate link down in the description below if you're interested in buying Dragonshield sleeves. It is the sleeves I use for literally all of my cEDH cards, which are, as many people know, not cheap cards. And I do not just trust them on a random product. I reached out to Dragonshield initially because I like their product, and I'm happy to be affiliated with them. I also want to remind everybody that I'm an ambassador for Monarch. Monarch Events is basically the first name in cEDH events and was one of the first people to start doing live cEDH tournaments. We have Eminence in the game now, but Monarch is still here, and after a short hiatus, they are back and ready to create some events. I have links down in the description below if you want to check out Monarch and check out all of the exciting things that they have going on. There is stuff that I can't quite announce yet, but they have a lot of really cool stuff coming up in the future. They are ready to jump back in the tournament scene with a bang, and I'm so happy to be an ambassador for Monarch so I can help them create the best cEDH events, and so I can help you guys know when these super awesome cEDH events are coming down the pipeline. So if you're interested in that, once again, check out the description down below and you can find out more about Monarch. Thank you all for watching this video. If you had any cards from this set that you guys are interested in that I did not cover in this video, I'd love to hear them down in the comments below. I'm always willing to admit that I definitely missed cards from these new sets, and I don't always see the interactions that people come up with. So there's a lot of really cool stuff in the pipeline right now, and I'm really excited. This set definitely has me the most interested in brewing that I have been in a while, which is always great to feel as a brewer, because brewing in cEDH is one of my favorite things, and I'm really excited for that. Thank you all for watching this video, and thank you especially to the people whose names are going to show up right now.
I can feel the blood creeping up from the heathens. Got will, got fight, got pride, got reason. If they want to go eat, then you know I'm gonna feed them. If you're coming for me, hope you're ready for a demon. I got eyes in the back of my head, I'm seeing. Take me for granted and you know I'm leaving. I'ma take what's mine with the webs I'm